Obviously, we made a big decision yesterday afternoon. And first and foremost, we want to thank Caris, LeVert, and George Niang. Really important parts of our team and our program. It was almost 3 years ago that we traded for Caris. And so Caris has been a big part of our ascent as a program. And so it's really difficult to make that phone call. And then obviously George, who has been the life of the locker room in a lot of ways. Give him credit, has played every single game since we've acquired him. And that's not easy to do, to play all 82 and be available. And so, they were big parts of our culture. And so to make these kinds of decisions don't come lightly. These are hard things to do. I think for us, even though we're off to such a great start, even though that the regular season record is what it is, we're thinking past April, and we're thinking, how do we continue to progress? How do we win rounds of the playoffs? How do we ultimately set ourselves up for a championship? And when you look at the different matchups that we could potentially see, along with the player that we added in DeAndre, we're excited with what we added to be ready for potential matchups. But let's talk about the player first before we go into, what's next. Obviously, we still have a lot of games left to play. Um, DeAndre Hunter brings tremendous defensive versatility. And I would urge everyone on this call to watch his last game in an Atlanta Hawks uniform when they put him on Victor Wembanyama to guard. Not the easiest cover in the world, if you can imagine. But that showed you his versatility just in terms of guarding fives all the way to perimeter guards to wings. We're very familiar with DeAndre going way back to UVA in his days there. Obviously, defense was his calling card back then, but he's super talented offensively, three-level scorer. Low usage, so he fits with our guys, our team currently. But he can make a shot. He can put the ball on the floor. He can put pressure on the rim. And so all of that mixed in with the price in terms of what we had to give up to get DeAndre Hunter, um, got me to the point where I was ready to make this kind of move that I don't take lightly. So with that, I'll open it up. Like I said, big shout out to Caris and George. They were first class and super professional when I had to call them. They wished us nothing but the best. And like I told our guys today at shoot around, it's okay to feel both ways, right? It's okay to feel two ways. You can have empathy and sadness for the loss of Caris and George, but you can also be very excited about DeAndre Hunter joining us. And I think that's how we're all feeling right now. With that, BJ, I'll open it up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll open up questions. Go to Chris Theodore.
Hey, Koby, how's it going?
Hey, Chris.
You mentioned the finals, you mentioned June, and in your press release, you mentioned championship as well. Why do you think DeAndre brings you closer to a championship than you were 48 hours ago?
I think when you look at the teams that we could potentially have to face, the matchups that are out there, um, in terms of defensive versatility, scoring from the wing, the shot making, the three-point shooting, um, we got better. We got better. I don't know how to quantify that. I can't put that into percentages for you. All I know is we got size and length at the wing now that can guard multiple positions. And that has been a prolific scorer this year that you have to account for on the floor at all times. And so you get a true two-way wing that you add to this group, and it makes us better.
How much did you consider chemistry and continuity and vibes and stuff like that when making this deal? Because, the other night Donovan said that we have enough, and Jared Allen said any addition would come at a subtraction as well. So how much did you consider, the chemistry, and why ultimately did you think it would be fine enough to change that?
A lot. You don't start off 15-0 without chemistry, great continuity, and great vibes. But at the end of the day, my job is to, help this team get better, right? And we can't just rest on our record. We can't just rest on chemistry and good vibes. We got to get better, and it's an arms race in the East. It's a very competitive, and we know that this is not going to be easy. And so we wanted to set ourselves up with the best chance to be successful. The other piece too, and again, yes, we are looking towards postseason, but DeAndre's 27, right, and playing the best basketball of his career. We're going to have him under contract for the next 2.5 years. He fits our timeline. He gives us cost certainty when we're going to be in some big depths in terms of apron restrictiveness, if you will. And so there's a lot more than just obviously the postseason. There's a long runway here with this team, and DeAndre fits that.
Thank you.
Danny.
Hey, Koby. You just mentioned the financial aspect of it, the cost certainty. The other thing that this move did was move you guys below the tax line for this year. How important was being able to accomplish something that you feel like makes the team better while also giving the team out of the tax for this season?
So I think it's huge to answer your question, but I want to make sure everyone on this call knows that in my conversations with Dan, and we sat down with Dan at length on Tuesday, I believe, and went over all the scenarios, all the targets, serious targets, I should say, and financial implications of each potential move. Never once did Dan say you need to get below the tax, right? Never once did he, say, look, man, like, I want that distribution check, get below the tax. He understood the implications of starting the clock now and what that would mean 4 years from now, 3, 4 years from now in terms of the repeater. I think for us to make this addition, this upgrade on the wing that we were really excited about, and duck the tax, made it really advantageous for us. To answer your question, yes, there was a lot of value of getting below the tax this year for several reasons. But I want to make sure that people understand that this was not a mandate to get below the tax. We would have been fine either way. And in a lot of scenarios, we were going to stand pat and be good with that. So this wasn't a desperation move. And we were going to be okay being in the tax, even if it was 2 million into the tax. But it certainly was of value, added value, I should say, to the DeAndre Hunter trade.
And then offensively, he was in a little bit of a higher usage role in Atlanta. How do you envision his role on that end of the floor looking different with you guys than it did in his previous stop?
I would push back a little bit, Danny, on the usage piece. Like, if you mean by, obviously he obviously got some shots up, and there was some more isolation for him this year, but for the most part, he plays off the ball, right? And you saw a lot of ball handling from Trey this year, obviously, and so he fits what we're trying to do. This is not a guy that needs the ball, right? And so I think he fits in seamlessly.
Cameron.
Koby, kind of sticking with that offense, his ability to hit those threes and being at a career high in attempts and makes, how much did that incite you to kind of pursue that, and what kind of fit does that give him with the Cavs?
I mean, going even further, in terms of the 3-point shooting piece, he's got some real height. Like, he's tall. He's 6'8". He has a 7'3" wingspan. And so you can't see him on Zoom, but like when he shoots from up here. And it's hard to contest that. And even if you contest that, he can get that off. And so I think that's a big part of it, a big part of our offense to have that threat. The fact that you're going to have to be one step closer to him because he can get it off very quickly and he can shoot over people. And so I think to your point, yes, absolutely. Like, to add a 40% 3-point shooter, that's a volume 3-point shooter. I mean, he's getting up almost 6.5 a game, almost 7 a game. Brings that threat to the floor. Then he can drive a closeout. And then we got to get him ingratiated in Kenny's system with our principles, how we cut, where we relocate to, and get him on board with that. But he's a very smart player. He has coming from Virginia, the legendary Tony Bennett, who retired this year, which is kind of crazy. Not that old for Tony, but Coach Bennett, he's well coached, right? And he has great principles on that side of the ball. We just got to get him up to speed on what we're doing with our offense.
And you mentioned chemistry. Does the fact that he has that deep tie with Ty Jerome make it a little bit easier maybe to get him initiated into this squad?
I think it certainly helps. I think it certainly helps. But him and Evan have worked a lot in the off season. They have the same representation, Wasserman, and so Evan has great familiarity with him too, working out in the same gym in LA a lot. And so, look, I think team chemistry is huge. It's going to take time, like anything else. But it's going to be pretty cool, to see Ty and DeAndre on the floor again together.
Kenny. Kenny.
There we go. Had to unmute. My bad. Koby, what was the overriding factor in making this trade? Was there one thing that pushed you over the top, like 3-8 in your last 11 against Boston, the inconsistency from the wings? Was there one thing that pushed you over the top?
I think that we got better. I mean, it sounds simple. It sounds like, oh, well, but um, I think the regular season is the regular season, and it's very important, especially for markets like ours. We want to show real success. We want to show continuity. We want to show improvement over each year. Individual achievements, obviously, like we haven't even mentioned, the three All-Stars, right? Evan getting his first All-Star game. You have to have a great, successful regular season to get these accolades. Darius Garland, back to playing the best basketball of his career, two-time All-Star. And then Donovan starting. Like, congratulations to those guys. So it's immensely important. But, again, the goal is to win rounds of the playoffs. And so this is not an overreaction to what you mentioned in terms of some of the records against the teams you sort of mentioned, but we've had success against good teams. We've had some elite wins. We've had some tough losses against those teams. This is when you get to a 7-game series against you name the team, giving Kenny every tool in the box to use to win that series. And DeAndre can play small, right? He can play up into a 4-man. He can guard 4s. He can guard some 5s, or you can switch with him. And then you can move him to the 2 or 3. This just gives you a chance to move stuff around the chessboard and be able to play multiple different ways in a playoff series, regardless of what that matchup could be. I think we're missing Dean and Isaac. I think that's been pronounced over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, not having them against Boston. Sort of gave me a little pause in terms of, well, I think they're going to get healthy. Hopefully we'll have them healthy for the playoffs. But having more of those guys, those kind of switchable guys that can guard all over the floor is immensely important. And so we took all of that into account in making the decision.
Are you surprised that all the reports, I agree with it, that you stole this player from them, that you didn't have to give up draft picks or your young players or some of the other wings? Are you surprised you were able to get this done for what you gave up? Thanks.
I would say we're happy with the cost. I would never I never try to do that analysis, who won the trade, who lost the trade. I think each team has different motivations. And for us, right, we're all in. We're trying to win this year and into the future. And that's the goal. And so that's our priority and that's our motivation. I'm not talking for Atlanta. All I know is their first draft pick past year, number 1 draft pick, 6'10" wing, right? That's going to play a lot of minutes in the future. And so maybe DeAndre is more expendable. Again, I'm making this up. I don't know what their motivations are, but I do know that, where we were is different from where they are. And if you look at their roster construction, maybe DeAndre was more expendable.
Vince.
What's up, Koby?
Hey, Spence, how you doing?
Good. So you speak to his defensive versatility and positional versatility. Just what are you envisioning with Evan and Jarrett next to him on that front line defensively, and just how they can play off of each other?
I think it's going to be great. I can't wait to see it. I think the games that we started Dean, and look, we missed Dean a lot. Let's be honest, right? We gotta get him healthy and right for the stretch run. But I think what you saw when we started that way was, being able to switch everything, really mess with teams and what they wanted to get to, especially in the beginning of the game, right? You start to figure it out as you go along. You can't stay the same way the whole game. These guys are too good. They'll figure it out. But when your first 3 or 4 possessions become isolation against these 6'8", 6'9", 6'10" great defenders, and you get off a bad contested two, and we're off to the races, those gives us good starts. And so I kind of envision, and again, this is a Kenny question, where what we start with or what happens, but you can be very switchable in those lineups, and you can force teams into shot profile that's advantageous for us.
And then this is a move, obviously 2-for-1, creates another open roster spot. Just how are you looking at those going forward? And I'm assuming you'll be active on the buyout market.
Man, I'm trying to let the dust settle a little bit. I know there's been reports out there of buyout names and all that stuff. I promise you, like, we are literally just, I came down here first thing in the morning. I was in Cleveland to finish off the deadline, and I got down to DC to be with the team at shoot around. I thought it was important that they see my face and understand all that went into that decision. And so we're letting the dust settle. We're sort of regrouping as a group when you lose 2 guys that were that important to you. And we're going to take it day by day. We're not in a rush to sign anybody. And we're going to sort of collectively come together as a group. We're going to embrace DeAndre when he gets here. And then we'll take it from there. But these are questions I have for the staff, Kenny, even some of our guys. Some of these guys have played with some of these buyout names that I want their insight. But we're not under pressure to do anything this second.
Daryl.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about Kenny Atkinson's role in this move, and then also too, does this kind of not so much solve, but kind of clarify the rotational challenges and making sure that everyone's getting the minutes that we've talked to Kenny about?
To answer your first question, yes. You make a deal of this magnitude, you want your head coach to be on board. So, that being said, it wasn't easy for him. I think this was a whole process of all of us coming together and getting to a consensus in a really healthy way. Because the first reaction, and was mine too, is why do we need to do something, right? We have a great record. This team is in great shape. This team chemistry, the continuity has clearly worked for us so far. Why? And I think, as you go about your process, you study DeAndre more, you watch DeAndre more, you think about the matchups, you think about postseason, and eventually you get there. And I think Kenny went through his process as well, and you guys will talk to him how he got there. And I thought it was a healthy process, but absolutely Kenny was central to our final decision.
And I know you touched on the chemistry aspect of this deal. I'm just curious, just as the person putting a team together, how do you tell if a player is a fit not only on the floor, but behind the scenes in the locker room? Because that's just one of those areas that you guys have done such a great job as far as establishing that behind the scenes culture.
First of all, I really appreciate that acknowledgement. I think that's been a big key to our success. We really go deep on the character piece. We want to make sure that guys not only want to be here, but can thrive here. We want the work ethic. We want the great attitudes. We want fountains, not drains. We talk about that all the time. And that remains true. Um, the um, the advantage of trading for DeAndre Hunter in terms of that piece was we have a lot of background on DeAndre. He was like he got picked one spot ahead of Darius in that draft. And we went really deep on that. I mean, we went really deep. We watch a lot of UVA, but I personally watch a lot of UVA basketball because Ty Jerome and me go way back and just love watching him play. But DeAndre was on that team. And so, along with Coach Bennett and going down to practices and watching them go on a tremendous run to win the national championship, we had a lot of background, Daryl, on him, and we know what kind of person he is and what he's going to bring to the table. And his maturation over the years, I think there's some follow-up there. It's not all just from the draft, but seeing his maturation and seeing how he's coming to his own in year 6, it's awesome. And so he's so excited to be here. That's another piece. I can't stress you enough, like, well, people that want to be in Cleveland, that want to be a part of this program, that want to help us win. And he couldn't be more excited. So that all checked out really well.
Joe G.
Hey, Kobe. DeAndre's been coming off the bench. I think he only started 4 games this year. How do you envision his role with the team starting, coming off the bench? Or is that more of a Kenny question?
Yeah, the tough ones go to Kenny, right? Like, I get the roster construction here, and here Kenny's the 6'8" talented wing. Figure it out.
And then you flew out to Washington. How did the guys react this morning?
Well, first in the morning, you're not going to get a whole lot from our guys. That's just, they're not, they didn't give me a standing ovation, but they get it. And I think it's just important for them to hear from me. The why, the being transparent. I think they understand that it's a business, but they want honesty and transparency, and they deserve that. And like I said, we can feel both ways about this. We can feel both ways. We can feel sadness. These were close friends of guys on the team. Like I said, Caris been with 3 years. You're not gonna find a more wonderful human being, first class human being. And so this was difficult, right? And we need to acknowledge that and not just put that to the side. And so I wanted to be able to look our guys in the eye and say the why and say it's okay to feel both ways, right? And we're all excited about DeAndre, but it's okay to have empathy for our guys that went out.
And how did Ty react?
So Ty is really close with George and Caris. That's actually the epitome of what we're talking about, right? DeAndre is one of his best friends that he won a national championship with, that he's really excited to play with again, that is super close to George and Caris. And so that's the balance you have to strike. But I think we all understand why we made the move.
Thank you.
Mikey.
Kobe.
Hey, Mike.
When you look at a deal like this, bringing in a guy like DeAndre Hunter, you guys have so much more kind of positional flexibility now and versatility. Is that kind of how you see the future of not necessarily basketball, but that being something even more important than it was in the past when you're looking to build a championship caliber roster?
That's a good question. I think so. Taking a step back, I get a little upset when we talk about our bigs as we have 2 traditional bigs, right? Like, and now Evan's throwing that on its face because he's making threes now. So it's not it used to be 2 non-shooting bigs, right? But even if they were, they can switch 1 through 5. So that's very, very unique. That gives us a totally different advantage that Jared can switch, that Evan can switch. And so that mobility from the 5 spot makes them anything but traditional, right? And so start there, right? Let's start there as this is the defensive anchors are there. That doesn't change anything. And then now supplementing that with, to your point, a defensive wing that it's very versatile and can switch. just amplifies that. But I do want to like um, give the flowers to Evan and Jared to continue to guard the best players on the floor, and they're going to do that. Even with DeAndre, we like to put Evan on wings. We like to switch Jared on to some point guards late in the clock and make them make tough shots over them. This is just supplemental. In terms of the whole big picture, we'll see. We'll see. Does this work out for us?
You good, Mike? Okay. Joe.
Hey, Kobe. Congratulations on the deadline there.
So we have a rule. You have to turn your camera on to ask a question.
Oh man.
I'm just if you don't look good, don't do it. I'm just saying, like there's etiquette here.
It's bad. I've aged
right,
like
well,
5
okay.
years in the last 6
Okay.
months.
Okay.
What's the timeline to get DeAndre on the floor?
So he's in Cleveland now, and he's doing his battery of tests for the physical, and then George and Caris have to pass their physicals in Atlanta before I can answer that.
Okay, fair enough. And then something that I wanted to go back the day that you addressed the media after trading for Donovan, you were talking about the long runway and that you wouldn't really be ready to contend until Evan is ready to contend. And maybe this is an obvious point, but is that time now? Is Evan a player that's ready to contend?
I think so. I mean, look, he's an all-star. I think he's going to have some games, right? Like the game against Boston. He know he wasn't at his best, right? And he responded the very next day in Detroit with a tremendous game. He's still growing. He's 23 years old. He's had remarkable success in his career. Never had a losing season. Has only seen postseason basketball, and we're going to continue to grow with him. That being said, when bringing it back to the Donovan Mitchell trade, that just boosted our ceiling right away, and accelerated our timeline to where we are now, and that's to be able to compete with the best in the world, and give ourselves a chance to win. But we're still balancing, how to continue to unlock Evan, and how to continue to get him the reps he deserves and to get better, because we all know as he achieves great heights in his career individually, that means the team is following. And so, yeah, I would, if you asked him and our guys, they would tell you yes. And I think that's more important than what I have to say.
Thanks.
Carter.
Hey, Kobe. Obviously, the team, going back to the culture question, the team's obviously sent out two players who are integral to the culture in Caris and George. How much of a vote of confidence does this represent in the other guys that remain to kind of continue to be the standard bearers for the culture you guys have set?
It's really interesting, Justin, that you say that. And so after I addressed the team, Kenny made some remarks about trade deadline and the guys that went out. And he said some really good things, but you just reminded me of what he said too, was it's such a vote of confidence to the group that we have and the leaders in the locker room now and how strong they are and how we're gonna because it's a blow. To your point, it's a blow when you lose two pillars of your locker room. But how strong is our locker room now? How good are the guys that we have in our locker room now? It absolutely is a salute to them. And they're going to have to take on more. Kenny said they're going to have to take on more. But he said just that. He said exactly what you just alluded to.
And, this is another instance of the team acquiring a player that you've kind of had your eye on for a minute. Ty was one of those guys. I remember there were reports around Lowry when the team picked him up. How do you balance, like when you lock in on a guy like that? How do you balance as an executive and as a front office member biding your time on those kind of things versus like now's the time to bring this guy in?
Well, it's availability in terms of, are they available, right? You can't draft every player that you love, and you can't trade for every player that you love, partially because they might not be available. But I think that, and I tell this to agents all the time, certainly during the draft process, the agents that hold their guys out, and I'm not talking about the top 3 picks or the top 5 picks. there's agents that hold their players out that are late first round picks or second round picks, or I'm not sending them in. And my thing is, there's such a long runway in terms of the NBA and relationships and how we feel about players. And there's interviews that we have in Chicago at the Combine that really strike me, that stay with me. There's interviews and workouts that really resonate with me, in Cleveland that we have that stay with me, right? Then I'm like, okay, if we ever have a chance to. And so I tell you at the time, like, you might be doing yourself a disservice. You might be trying to funnel him to a certain team, but you're missing the relationship piece. You're missing the chance to audition for all these other front offices. And so, I think, to your point, we keep in our head who we really like and who we want to potentially acquire down the road. And some we have real strong feelings about, and DeAndre was certainly one of those guys.
Thank you.
Jackson.
Caris's ball handling has been really important the last couple of playoff runs. Does Ty's emergence this season off the bench really give you confidence to move on from Caris to address another position of need?
I think that's part of it. I think DeAndre fits a need, so we can start there. But to your point, Ty has been a revelation this year, and he plays with basketball IQ, his ball handling, his playmaking. He can play alongside Donovan or Darius. It's actually a great look to get Darius off the ball and make him a shooter, run him off down screens, play different ways because Ty can handle the pressure of bringing it up. And so yes, Ty certainly alleviates the need for the ball to be in Donovan and Darius's hands all the time. You definitely want to mix that up. And that was the value of Caris, to your point, to be able to mix it up, to play make, to handle the ball, and to just alleviate a lot of the usage that those guys and the demands that those guys have to have from a ball handling perspective. Ty certainly takes some of that burden off of those guys.
So we haven't really talked about George Niang too much, but you are losing your backup power forward. DeAndre he's really split his time, in the past as a small ball four. Do you envision him being that role, especially with Dean out right now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, 3, 4, he can play up really good. Like I said, go watch the San Antonio game. But he can guard all over the floor, and I think there'll be a lot of times when we see him at the 4.
We'll go with our last two, Evan, and then Justin to wrap things up for us today.
Hey, Koby, hope you're doing well. My question for you is how did the conversations go with George and Caris? I mean, like you said, this is a tight-knit group, and I would imagine they were surprised when they got the news.
Yes, some of these are some of the hardest calls you have to make, because for all intents and purposes, Caris and George gave their all to this franchise, and they both made decisions to come here. You know what I mean? I traded for Caris, and then he re-signed. That was his decision to stay with us and be with us. George had 3 or 4 really strong suitors in that off season in free agency, and chose us. And so they were bought in, and they were all the way in, and that's what's hard. In a lot of ways, I wish they weren't great dudes, right? It'd be a lot easier to but they weren't. And so, look, I want to keep those conversations to what they were. I would just say they were super professional, very appreciative. And the contents of the conversation will keep between us. But I want them to know that all the relationships that they've kept or they have with our team, players, front office, coaches, performance staff, those don't go anywhere. And as you know, they will always be embraced in Cleveland because of what they gave. And so, obviously feel free to reach out to those guys and thank them for their time here. They'll be appreciative of that.
And you had mentioned Kenny being in the loop during this process, and I know you had told Joji that it's a Kenny decision whether or not DeAndre starts, but has Kenny kind of given you a bit of a groundwork and idea of how he plans to utilize DeAndre, whether it's the offense or the defensive side of the ball?
We're going to play him all over the floor. He's going to guard a lot of different positions. To be honest, like this decision and this trade, um, you know, it's interesting and we've done a lot of deals. I know we haven't been volume heavy recently. A lot of people are mad at me for not doing more deals, but um, you got to get the deal to a point where you can make a decision. And so you can talk about pros and cons and this and that and what you would do. Like we didn't get to that point until 1 o'clock on what was it, Thursday, yesterday? And so, once you get to the point where, okay, we're actionable on something, then it becomes real. And I just got down here today to address the team on the losses that we have. I think the next conversation, Evan, not to duck your question, is going to be, okay, what's next with DeAndre, right? And that's going to be a fun conversation. But we just haven't had that yet. We had to get there in terms of making that decision, which was a lot went into that.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to wrap things up with Justin. Justin, bring us home.
Hey, Koby. In today's salary cap era, it does seem like it's a struggle for teams to sometimes acquire talent and, maintain their depth. What does it mean for you and the rest of the organization to have not only the core locked up for the next few years, but really kind of guys 5 through 8 throughout the rotation as well?
So absolutely, right. The talent that we brought in from draft, free agency, and trade has been remarkable. We're really, really happy with that. But Justin, I want to take a brief moment to give a shout out to Mike Gansey, Brandon Weems, Brendan Yu, who was our charge GM at the time with Sam Merrill. Like the guys that we've gotten from an undrafted perspective, and through a G League perspective, have been extraordinary. Like when you look at the Dean Wades of the world, right, and the Sam Merrills of the world, and the Craig Porter Juniors of the world, our staff goes really deep, and where would we be without those guys, right? Like it's really, I mean, yes, we need to point to the all-stars and Jared Allen, who I think deserved to be an all-star. You know, but the depth of the roster, that's that's the work. That's part of the work that supplements such a good team. That's why we're deep. And when you're not asset rich, not a lot of draft picks, you gotta see what's under that rock and set up a pathway for them to be successful. And so, we have now done really well with two-way guys that we've converted to rotation guys. We've done well from our G League perspective, getting them up to the main roster. And so really want to give a big salute to, Mike Gans, who runs our scouting department, that brings these opportunities to us, that helps us supplement the roster. Because to your point, it gets really difficult when you're locked in a good way. The guys are under contract. That's going to give us a great runway. But how do we supplement that? And you got to find different avenues to find those guys. And I think we've done a pretty good job there.
That sounds great. My last question is regarding DeAndre Hunter's versatility as a post-up player. One of the ways that teams have kind of countered the Cavs' dynamic guards is by putting their shooting guard and their small forward onto the guards. Can you speak to Hunter's ability to kind of make teams play the Cavs a little more honestly on the defensive end, where they're going to get punished if they put a smaller point guard onto DeAndre Hunter?
I think we're trying to exploit that more for sure. And that goes for Evan and Jared, right? Though sometimes you'll switch the smalls on. And I think in years past, you can almost get under Evan and move him back, right? Now you can't do that as much. He can turn around and put you into the rim. We have two all-world guards. Listen, like you're gonna have to come up with a lot of different ways to guard those guys, switching, putting size on them, putting speed on them. Not too much to slow down Darius this year or Donovan. But I do think that, yes, you want to punish the switch. We definitely want to exploit teams that are trying to do different gimmick stuff to us. And DeAndre certainly helps with that. But give those guards credit. Just like we have to face some incredible wings and big guys, you got to go up against the best backcourt in the league. And teams, that's the first thing on their list. We are heavily scouted. How are we going to take this away? And give Donovan Darius credit. Like they are the game plan, and they figured it out, and they've been unbelievable this year for us.